A corpse hit the ground right in front of the starving girl in the forest. It was the body of the mother she had spent months searching for. Alejandro crouched down, his voice soft as a lullaby. "Aren't you hungry? Then eat." He said it the way a host invites a guest to the table. That was the second time Arsinoe died by his hand. But the story has to begin years earlier. She is the only tyrant queen who ever razed an entire city to the ground. A slave's daughter who rose to conquer the whole continent. In just 5 years, she broke the curse that had crushed an entire race, so that every kind of blood stood equal, and no one was looked down on again. But not a single person knew that this was already Arsinoe's fourth life. At the coronation of the new queen, a man knelt in the open and proposed to her before the entire court. His face carried the shyness of a boy in love. Anyone watching would have sworn he had adored the queen for years. Only Arsinoe felt as if she had just dropped into a pit of ice. The man who had stepped forward was Alejandro, her husband in her last life, and the man who would use the bloodiest methods on record to unify the continent. She had already died at his hands 3 times. Killing intent surged up through her chest. She wanted to tear him apart where he stood, strip the flesh from his bones. At the exact moment Arsinoe was about to break, the Grand General stepped in and pulled her back into the present. Guards on both sides moved at once. Swords left their sheaths and neither side gave an inch. Her road to revenge began right there. She was the 5th princess of the Kingdom of Parnes. The 8 princes and 4 princesses were all born of the queen. She alone was the exception. Her mother had been a slave girl offered up to the king. The 2 of them were ranked as a minor concubine, living out the years in a forgotten palace, until a plague tore through most of the royal bloodline. That was when the empire sent a letter demanding a marriage alliance. Parnes was a small kingdom. It had no standing to refuse. Arsinoe was handed over as a princess, and became the 3rd consort of Crown Prince Alejandro. Nobody guessed that Alejandro was a true war fanatic. In a damp underground cell, the iron door swung slowly open. "I'm here, Arsinoe." She glared at him. "Drop the act. Don't look so tense. I came to bring you good news." "You've already guessed it. Your homeland has fallen to me." Before that, Alejandro had used her mother's life as leverage, forcing her to reveal the royal escape tunnels. He said it with relish. The Grand General got in the way, but the plan went through anyway. "Your homeland is imperial territory now." Arsinoe swallowed the tremor in her voice and asked her last question. "What happened to my mother?" "Your mother? She died of illness a long time ago." Alejandro tilted his head to see her face clearly. "So you do cry. I thought you couldn't feel anything." Her voice turned strangely calm. "You came here to kill me. I'll beg you for one last thing. Let me end it myself. Give me back the dagger I brought from home." How pitiful. Cold as I am. I'm not so cold that I'd deny my former wife that much mercy. Then goodbye. She picked up the worn little dagger. It was a secret only she knew. Every time she used it to end her life, she woke up again at 12 years old. But no matter how she struggled, she always died at Alejandro's hands. The first time she tried to stop him. The second time she ran. The third time she faked submission, hoping only to keep herself and her mother alive. Alejandro's blade never once hesitated. This was the last time. If the ending refused to change, she would rather sleep forever. When she opened her eyes again, she was 12 years old. Her mother was still alive. Looking at the woman who had never once been unkind to her, she made a request that left her mother speechless. "Please send me to the officers' academy, to protect my country and to protect you." This time she would walk a completely different road. Crown Prince Alejandro of the Empire. He kept no women, kept no hobbies, as if he had been born for nothing but killing. In her last life, during her second attempt to run, Alejandro personally drove a wooden stake through her left hand, then threw her into the forest to rot. By the time hunger had scraped down to her bones, she stared at the man in front of her. "Alejandro," his face full of resentment, "you dare refuse my kindness." Guards. "Take her eyes out for me. If she won't look at my gift, what does she need them for?" Whatever she did, Alejandro always found a crueler way to break her. By her 4th year in the army, those nightmares still refused to release her. Every night they reminded her that she had to protect the people she loved and grind this cursed fate into dust. Parnes was barely a third the size of the empire, and yet it was the last kingdom Alejandro ever conquered. All because Parnes had a prodigy called Unbeatable, Walter Heiberg. She entered the military academy with one main goal: to pull that man onto her side. Parnes took in many races. It was not a country of humans alone, but home to a great many other bloodlines. Their instructor was named Jan, of the Lycan wolf tribe. The Lycan were born with inhuman strength. After a brutal training session, every cadet lay flat on the dirt. One of them complained, "Who on earth is supposed to outrun that dog?" The cadet beside him hissed a warning. "Jan is the Grand General's own adjutant." The whole group perked up at once. Grand General Walter was a legend to every soldier in Parnes. But most humans still refuse to accept other races. That thing isn't fit to serve the Grand General. Jan had been standing right behind him. To a Lycan, that line cut deeper than a fist. On every full moon, the Lycan lose control. To keep from hurting anyone, they rely on illusion grass from the west to stay lucid. 3 days straight, no gaps. The side effects hollow them out. Scorned all year round. You think we enjoy breathing that stuff in? Don't look at us like that. When you join the army, there will be plenty of Lycan there. Don't ever behave like this. The orange-haired cadet bowed his head and apologized fast. Jan let it go and only reminded them of a special lecture that afternoon. Word spread through the academy within the hour. Grand General Walter was coming. 4 years into her enrollment. This was Arsinoe's first chance to see the legend in person. He was also the only opponent Alejandro had ever feared. In her last life, Parnes refused to fall, and that was what pushed Alejandro into the madness the whole continent later paid for. That damned Grand General, is there really no way to deal with him? Walter was the only man who ever made him taste defeat. His loyalty to Parnes was absolute. He couldn't be bought and he couldn't be beaten. Without Walter standing guard, Alejandro would have flattened Parnes long ago, no marriage needed. Boots rang against the stone floor of the Great Hall. Arsinoe laid eyes on Walter for the first time. He was the first card that could pull her out of her fate. He carried a long list of titles: the undefeated general, the hero who saved the nation, the pride of Parnes. Even within the Heiberg family, famous for producing soldiers, Walter was the strangest one of all. He graduated from the academy ahead of schedule, became the youngest brigade commander on record, and at 22 he put down the Lycan uprising and was made Grand General by special decree. In combat, in strategy, in judgment, he stood far above ordinary men. He carried the sword Dawn. Anyone but its master who touched it went mad. An unbroken chain of victories had turned him into a legend across the continent. Except that the man himself and his gear were far plainer than the rumors promised. Walter finished a very short introduction, then opened the floor to questions. Arsinoe quietly worked out how to approach him. Just then, a cadet spoke up loudly. "General, you only won that war by killing the wolf chieftain, and now you've made a wolf your adjutant. Will that pack really obey you?" Arsinoe frowned. Her head was already a mess, and someone still had to ask a question that stupid. Taki, who led the uprising, was a criminal long before he was a chieftain. In public, he played the hero. In the dark, he held a monopoly on illusion grass. That was why the wolves kept losing control. Every disaster traced back to him. By the time she snapped out of it, the hall had gone completely silent. Every eye in the room was on her. Damn it, she had said it out loud again. Even Walter was watching her closely. "I don't know how a cadet came to learn all that, but you're not wrong. Every officer under my command knows the truth. Though I'd like to correct one thing. Your phrasing isn't quite right. Once a man swears the army oath, whatever race he was born into, he is a soldier of this kingdom. Any race that serves the kingdom will be protected equally, because His Majesty wants a world with no discrimination left in it. That is also the military code of Parnes." Walter closed the lecture. As Arsinoe turned to leave, a voice called after her, "Cadet Arsinoe, a moment of your time, please." This was clearly the first time they had ever met. So how did he know her name? They walked the length of the corridor, out to the garden behind the hall. Walter stopped and turned around. He bent at the waist. "Your Highness?" Arsinoe was wary. "How do you know me?" "I serve the royal house. Of course I recognize you. And to me personally, Your Highness is also—" Walter let the sentence die. Before she could catch the rest, he had changed the subject. "I visited Lady Angela at the palace once. She worries about you a great deal. Forgive me for overstepping. Have you considered returning to the palace?" "An army camp is not a safe place." Arsinoe put her surprise away. "So you know my mother. Thank you. But my affairs are mine to handle." Walter wasn't finished. War is far crueler than training. Your Highness may not survive it. She understood why he said it. This body was only 16. To him, she was still a child. General, how many princes and princesses does the royal house have? Counting your Highness, 10 in total. And how many of them are children of a concubine? Walter hesitated. Just one. My mother was a dancing girl, a desert slave. She never even had a name. They simply called her the lesser consort. She was never allowed out of her chambers. That flat, unvarnished answer changed something in Walter's face. The place may be luxurious and quiet, but it is still a birdcage. If I go back, I only get locked in again. I want to learn how to protect people, not how to be kept. Royal blood still runs in your Highness. Arsino only smiled. Every word you just said came from the bottom of your heart, not one lie in it. You are absolutely loyal to the royal house of Parnes, as long as that loyalty never changes. She had found the way to win this general over. The corner of her mouth curled up. Good. I hope your loyalty stays exactly where it is. He spoke again. I understand why your Highness left the palace, but why enlist? Because you are going to be mine. Arsino only thought it. I want to protect Parnes, and I hope to fight at the Grand General's side. Why would your Highness want to fight beside me? Perhaps because your face is very hard to forget. Walter, always cold and unreadable, finally let something flicker across his face. Arsino went on. Please remember this day. Walter went still. His eyes drifted somewhere far away. He was remembering the first time he saw her. But he pulled the feeling back almost at once. He bowed respectfully. You graduate in 2 years. I look forward to seeing how you grow. Then he turned and walked deeper into the academy. Arsino watched his back in silence. She was waiting too, waiting for the day she snapped Alejandro's neck with her own hands. 2 years later, the king of Parnes died. The princes and princesses died one after another, each death stranger than the last. 2 royals were left. The 5th prince was blind. The throne sat empty. The lords gathered in full, every one of them nursing a private calculation. More than a few had already set their eyes on the crown. Walter was the last man to enter the council chamber. Under the shocked stares of the room, he announced something that shook the walls. The royal line of Parnes is not extinct. The 5th princess, Arsino, daughter of Lady Angela, is still alive. The lords glanced at one another. One objected immediately. Her mother was a slave. That is not a legitimate bloodline. Duke Gilles was silent a long while before speaking. I don't oppose it, but she is in no way prepared to rule. Walter's voice stayed level. Let me ask you all, are we gathered here to choose a temporary regent or a new king? The hall went dead quiet. The question had stripped bare the thing nobody would say. Not one man in that room would settle for regent. Duke Gilles opened his mouth, and Walter cut him off. If you truly intend to choose a new king, think very carefully first. And I would ask you all to reread the first article of the kingdom's military code. Outside the window, a chant went up with real force behind it. We are loyal to the royal house of Parnes, and we will spend everything we have to protect it. Marquis Luther fanned himself and called him back. Once Walter left, the chamber came alive. Let's be honest, if you announced you wanted the crown, every man here would fall in line. Walter looked at him coldly. My duty is to protect the royal house, not to sit on its throne. Luther kept probing, or Duke Gilles could found an entirely new dynasty. So who does qualify as your king? Not one man present is fit to be king. Luther froze, then laughed. So you've worked it all out already. Why can't we be king? Walter looked out the window. Suppose you had 2 choices. Take in 50 refugees or hand your territory 50 head of cattle. Which do you pick? Weighing my people's interests, probably the second. That is a politician. Why? A king takes in the refugees, orders me to go seize the cattle, then hands the cattle to those refugees so they can farm and live. Luther understood at once. So there's a third option. Walter smiled faintly. A king has to shelter everyone. Even if it costs him many times the effort, he leads them all down the right road. That is the road a sovereign walks. You mean that sovereign is Princess Arsino? I see. Except Duke Gilles has already declared the council will reconvene in a month. Right now he is raising troops across his territory. If you are set on backing the princess, a clash is hard to avoid. I favor neither side. Neither of your positions is wrong. I only hope this ends peacefully. In truth, Walter had never once contacted Arsino. He hadn't even asked what she wanted before deciding to put her on the throne. He had no idea yet that all of it was landing exactly the way she wanted. A year had passed since the two of them last met. Back then, for helping the Lycan along the border, she was a wanted woman among the Raffi. And that was precisely why Walter came to believe she was the only person fit to rule Parnes. Arsinoe had rescued Lycan again and again on Raffi land. That was what finally crossed their line. The Raffi spoke of them with contempt. Why help those things? That filthy lot deserved to be crushed by the Empire. Arsinoe hit back. They did nothing wrong. They're abused for being Lycan and nothing else. In their place, I'd run too. Lycan refugees fleeing the Empire usually drifted into this region. On a walk with her mother, Arsinoe happened across a Lycan woman and her child. The way they clawed at survival reminded her of herself and her own mother in their years on the run. She couldn't leave it alone and quietly moved the two of them to a safe country. Word spread fast among the Raffi that someone was helping Lycan escape. More and more of them came to her for help. She had only meant to bring her mother here and disappear. Instead, she became the benefactor of an entire community. Just as she was weighing whether to move again, a Raffi suddenly opened her cell door. Someone's here to bail you out. Arsinoe raised her head. A tall figure walked slowly into the cell. It was Walter Heiberg. It's been a long time, Your Highness. 2 years ago, she had taken her mother out of the palace. Her mother had adapted to the outside world remarkably well. She even went regularly to the nursery to look after Raffi children. Walter listened quietly as she talked about Lady Angela. Warmth came into his eyes. Seeing Your Highness safe puts me at ease. Only then was Arsinoe certain he had come for her. The first time she was arrested for helping Lycan, she heard the Parnes army was stationed nearby and sent for them. She had picked a name at random, and Walter came. This time it was him again. So Your Highness has been helping the Lycan all along? She looked slightly embarrassed. I don't know how it turned into this. It wasn't deliberate. You said exactly the same thing last time. I don't recall that. She turned her face away. How are things in the kingdom? I hear Morpion and Angustra are preparing for war. I'm afraid that fire will spread to Parnes. Your Highness worries about the country. Arsinoe looked into her teacup. I may have been forced into hiding in Vumnos, but I was still born in Parnes. I grew up in Parnes. Worrying about it is only natural. Has Your Highness never thought about going back? The question caught her off guard. Before she could answer, Walter delivered the blow. 10 days ago, His Majesty passed away. The cup slipped from her hand. Her father was not supposed to die for another 2 years. Half a year ago, a strange illness began spreading through the nobility. His Majesty, the Crown Prince, and the princes all fell sick one after another. Walter went down on one knee, bowing very low. Your Highness, if you consent, I intend to raise you as the 19th sovereign of Parnes. She felt nothing for the collapse of the royal house. On the surface, Lady Angela had been the king's favorite. In reality, she had lived her whole life afraid of being killed. Arsinoe's childhood had been nothing but bullying and abuse. The royal house had never shown her a shred of kindness. She had no intention of risking herself to save those people. Watching Walter split logs outside the window, she couldn't help a shiver. Is this man even human? Working bare-chested and cold like that? Everything that happened yesterday still felt like a dream. In the future, she knew, Parnes would be dragged into a war between 3 nations 3 years from now. The kingdom would be gutted. In that state, she would use her connections to win over the lords, then borrow Walter's strength to take the throne. That had been the plan. She never expected the whole thing to be turned upside down. But Walter had apparently already chosen her side. Was that a good thing or a bad thing? Walter stopped mid-swing. He set the longsword down. Your Highness is awake. Arsinoe picked up the teapot and asked on purpose. What are you doing? We're running low on firewood. I'm splitting more. The same stiff answer as always. She did not yet know that in a few months this log-splitting man would be the only thing standing between her and death. Walter wiped away sweat that wasn't there. I've trained in colder places than this. Your Highness needn't worry. Arsinoe finally gave up. Actually, there's something I want to say. Could you put a shirt on first? This is getting awkward for me. Steam curled up from the teacup. Walter narrowed his eyes slightly and took a sip. She studied him quietly. However she looked at it, he didn't seem like a soldier. She pointed into the distance. A sword that valuable, just lying there. Is that really all right? It can't be damaged, so it's fine. Walter put out a hand. If it bothers Your Highness, I'll put it away. With a hiss of wind, the sword flew back into his grip on its own. I startled you. Arsinoe was instantly interested. What else can you do? Walter held out his hand. The tip of his boot flicked a log into the air. The blade flashed once. The log stopped dead in midair. I can hold objects or living things around me still for a short while. Only within 3 meters, and only for 3 to 5 seconds. No wonder Alejandro feared him this much in her last life. Arsinoe meant it. A man like you staying in Parnes is a waste, which is why I still don't understand why you'd pick me. Because your highness carries the late king's blood. That reason alone wouldn't convince even me. So what's the real one? Because I admire what your highness has done. She was more confused than ever. Walter looked away. Forgive me. I'm not good with words. As I understand it, your highness has been helping the Lycan here for over a year. What I am looking for is someone with the heart to protect the weak. Someone who will shoulder every risk for a peaceful country and a happy people, who dares pay a sovereign's price. Arsinoe couldn't believe it. That's all it took. If your highness thinks that is a small thing, it only proves my point. I have seen the makings of a great ruler in you. And to prove that alone, I would give my life to serve you. What was there left to hesitate over? Walter was the sword she had wanted from the start. She stood up and spoke plainly. Walter, remember what was said today. From now on, keep me safe. Right now, you are the only person I can trust. I will give everything I have, and I will try to become the sovereign you expect. I'll be relying on your counsel from here on. The second session of the Parnes Royal Council opened on schedule. The lords went on holding each other in check. Duke Walton openly challenged Marquis Luther for walking out of the last council halfway through. Luther answered evenly, "You're reading too much into it. I remain neutral. I favor no one." Right after that, Duke Gilles entered the hall. Walton was clearly one of his backers. Luther felt a quiet unease. He had no idea how Walter meant to break this deadlock. Duke Gilles glanced at the empty seat to his right. That was Walter's place. He frowned. He had explicitly told Walter to attend. The moment he declared the session open, the great doors shut tight opened once more. Apologies, I'm late. Walter didn't step in. He turned to one side. After you, your highness. Arsinoe walked into the hall in a red gown, entirely unhurried. It was her first formal appearance. A pleasure to meet you all. The hall fell silent. Duke Gilles' composed face twisted on the spot. The moment she sat, he was the first to speak. I believe the last time I saw your highness you were 3 or 4. Is Lady Angela well? The pleasantry had thorns in it. He wanted her mother's low berth on the table to humiliate her. Murmurs started up around the room. The Gilles family had monopolized sea trade for generations. Their wealth rivaled the crown's. He was learned and decorated, and even the late king had deferred to him. But that power and that arrogance were his greatest weakness. Arsinoe stayed calm. Forgive me for coming here uninvited. The Grand General has told me everything about the kingdom's situation. There is one thing I must say plainly. Duke Gilles smiled without smiling, dripping sarcasm. Getting the Grand General himself to escort you. The princess is clearly determined. My education is shallow. My words may be blunt. I ask your patience. Gilles said it offhand. Speak. Her tone changed. Instead of endless argument, remember the throne is still empty. The court has been headless far too long. This has never happened before. Watching all of you hesitate genuinely pains me. Then her voice softened. Though I understand your difficulty, the royal house has fallen. Choosing a new king must be agonizing. Gilles narrowed his eyes, openly mocking. Then, in your view, who is most suitable? He thought to himself, go on, say it. In my opinion, the man in this hall most suited to the throne is Duke Gilles. Walter, standing beside her, panicked instantly. Your Highness! Arsinoe turned her head and gave him a small calming signal. Then she struck. Provided, of course, that the Duke can prove he is not the one secretly serving the Empire. The hall erupted. Even Marquis Luther, always neutral, went grim. Duke Gilles shouted in fury, complete fabrication. You had better retract that slander. I do not speak carelessly. The Postmeyer Strait is under the Duke's administration. Lately, a great number of Lycan slaves have been moving through it. And those slaves, requisitioned by the Empire, keep flowing into Morpion, a nation with a weak army. Luther started. Isn't Morpion at war with Angastra? Correct. A weak nation striking first. Trace that slave route back and you'll find who is actually lighting fires on the Parnes border. Your Highness means the Empire is behind that war. Yes. Duke Walton shot to his feet. Baseless talk. Walter spoke up. For 2 years, Her Highness has been in Vumnos helping Lycan escape. All of them fled the Empire and Morpion. Luther seized the point at once. Vumnos is a Rafi city-state. Just ask the Rafi under the Grand General and we'll know. The room turned on its axis. Arsinoe looked straight at the furious Duke Gilles. The Duke has built a vast fortune on his shipping treaty with the Empire. He is also openly pro-imperial. If you take the throne, word that Parnes has become the Empire's lapdog will spread everywhere. The dignity of the royal house will collapse entirely. Gilles fought for composure. Baseless conjecture. At worst, I annul the treaty. Duke, on the strength of one conjecture, you'd sever ties and go to war with the Empire. His face darkened. What exactly are you driving at? Arsinoe answered calmly, but with absolute authority. Until this country is stable, I ask the Duke to serve as regent. The throne I will guard myself. You want to be king? Not only that, I also intend to cure the strange illness. Luther's expression changed instantly. He came out of his chair. You can cure it, yes, and I believe it will help your daughter. Every lord in the hall changed color, but no one dared believe it. The illness that had tormented the kingdom for so long could be cured. Arsinoe knew exactly how it sounded, so she kept goading Duke Gilles. So will the Duke now throw his full weight behind my succession? Gilles' face contorted. He roared. Support you. Everything you've said is guesswork. The finest scholars in the country are helpless. What makes you think you can cure it? You just want the crown. The corner of her mouth lifted, hooked. Whether I'm lying, you'll all see soon enough. As for the cure, I share it only with those who back my succession. The hall exploded. Outrageous! Are you threatening us? Threatening, you misunderstand. Have you forgotten who I walked into this hall with? Only then did the lords realize her long-winded speech had been quietly leaving them a way out. At the last council, the Grand General publicly confirmed her as the legitimate heir, which means she stands under the protection of the army's own pillar, the man who actually holds power. Arsinoe lifted her chin and asked aloud, General, who is my father? The late King of Parnes, His Majesty Simontheus II. Do your words speak for the entire army of this kingdom? They do. Then do you acknowledge me as the new sovereign of Parnes? In total silence, Walter drew his sword. He went down on one knee. He raised the blade in both hands before the young woman. That was his answer. May the dawn light the road your majesty walks. Arsinoe raised her head and swept her eyes across the chamber, then looked straight at the chairman's seat. I did not come here to persuade you, nor to negotiate. I came to wake the men still hiding from reality, and to give you one chance to accept me. The cure was a gift I handed over in passing. You have one day. Anyone who wants to face my army may leave now. Anyone who doesn't should prepare to swear loyalty to the crown again. I hope to see you all at this hour tomorrow. On her very first day back in the capital, she landed a hard blow on the lords who had looked down on her. After the session, with the palace sealed off, Walter gave up his own quarters to her. She had just thrown the council into chaos, and he hadn't questioned her once. Arsinoe remembered another nickname he had carried in her last life. The loyal dog of the Parnes crown, a dog that only knew how to obey its master. Even an unreasonable order, he would accept without blinking. But while he accepted it, what was he actually thinking? She couldn't see through him at all. If Walter only obeyed blindly, then this sharp sword was double-edged and could turn on her. She genuinely didn't know whether to trust it. She toweled her hair dry. There was a noise, and in came the Grand General and the Wolf John. But she wasn't the one who was startled. Why is there a woman in here? Jan's wolf ears shot straight up. His tail went rigid. Not until she spoke. Did he place her? You're that kid from the academy. Arsinoe, right? What are you doing here? The Grand General said he'd be back before sunset. Jan crossed to the desk. Then I'll wait for him. She followed him over. Why aren't you out with your unit? Where did he go? Wasn't the full moon a few nights ago? For 3 days around it, none of us can work. Jan's nose twitched. He was at her side in an instant. What's that smell in your pocket? Puzzled, Arsinoe emptied it out. Odds and ends. Insect repellent, a few round pebbles, and a shard of bone. Things she'd picked up on her way out of Vumnos. Jan's eyes locked onto the bone. That smell is something else. His eyes lit up. I've never even touched dragon bone. She'd heard dragon bone was a fatal temptation for wolves, Except this shard was mostly fake. She lifted it and gave it a shake. Jan's yellow pupils contracted. His gaze tracked the bone and never left it. Panting like that, he was exactly like the puppy she'd kept as a child. This was far too entertaining. Right then, Walter came back, to find his adjutant behaving precisely like a dog, clamped down on a piece of bone. What is going on here? Arsinoe wiped the drool off her hand and greeted him without a flicker. She hadn't expected that after she threw it, he'd fetch it back in his teeth. Walter wearily told Jan to finish up and go rest. He had no idea the harmless bone in that girl's pocket was the smallest card she was holding. Before he left, Jan leaned in close, his voice barely audible. Those stones in your pocket, if you've no use for them, try tossing them to the Grand General. You might see something worth watching. Once Jan was gone, Walter sighed softly. If my adjutant was disrespectful, please overlook it. He hasn't shaken off the full moon yet. Arsinoe thought back on her own antics. If anyone here was disrespectful, it was her. That word, Majesty. When it's just the two of us, stop using it. I can't. Rank has to be clear. I could never be so presumptuous. To her, rank and class were empty labels, at least in a space that belonged to only two people. She wanted those constraints gone. General, honestly, was I too much in the council today? Your Highness asks very directly. I'll probably keep being rude to them for a while yet. So when it's just us, I'd like to breathe a little. Walter was about to argue, but she smiled and stopped him. Loosen up. There's no need to force it. For now, she had to stay at headquarters. She was occupying Walter's quarters as it was. He was the one inconvenienced. Walter hesitated a moment, then finally spoke up. Duke Gilles has enormous pride. If he's provoked, I'm afraid the reaction will be hard to predict. I wounded his pride badly enough that cooperation is probably off the table. There'll be a fair few empty chairs tomorrow. Hearing an answer that blunt and unguarded, Walter narrowed his eyes. Your Highness, I told you to stop calling me Majesty. As you know, Duke Gilles is very good at balancing factions. Going head-to-head with him is unwise. I know. If he's gone, nobody will be left to keep the other lords in check. If we go to war with Duke Gilles, can we win? Walter smiled with complete confidence. Your Highness needn't worry, we will win. Then that's enough. The rest can wait for tomorrow's council. Let's eat first. The next morning, in the council chamber, yesterday's noise had vanished entirely. So Duke Gilles still refuses to acknowledge me. Arsinoe looked around the room. Everyone absent today will be tried for treason. Marquis Luther stood. I have a question. I know what you want to ask. She gave a signal. Several knights came in carrying silver trays and set one before each lord. Looking at the herbs laid out in front of him, Marquis Luther pressed his lips together. Arsinoe looked at him and asked, This illness. In the early stage, do the hands shake? Then blisters on the skin? Then the hair falls out? Yes, my daughter's symptoms are identical. What stage is she at now? Luther's voice went hoarse. She can barely walk. She can still be saved. It hasn't reached the final stage. Follow the prescription and she'll improve before long. Luther was too moved to speak. Duke Walton picked up the herbs. These few things can cure it. Luther asked urgently, too. You can really save my daughter, 2 months to a full recovery. But there is one more thing. She took a glass vial from Walter. The liquid in this vial is the source of the illness. Never touch it again. It was the beauty tonic that had swept the capital, long after the two of them had left. The room still hadn't recovered. Duke Walton spoke first. So this is what killed the late king. Simply touching that liquid causes the illness. And back then, people were drinking it like an elixir. Something sad crossed his face. It seems no one was any different. Marquis Luther rose slowly. I must go see my daughter. On the training ground, the autumn rain came down in sheets. The soldiers kept drilling through the downpour. Arsinoe winced. They train even in weather like this? Not normally. But the alert level has been raised recently. The whole army is drilling harder. Training in the rain really is miserable. Remembering things from before, she offered them a silent moment. But one gaze never left her. What is it? Something you want to tell me. Walter snapped back and realized he had been staring a long while. Nothing, I just feel fortunate to have your majesty. How did you learn the cure? When I was small, the consorts often summoned me. At some point, I noticed their complexions had turned an unnatural white. They were forever carefully smoothing some unmarked liquid onto their faces. I once asked offhand what it was. They sneered. Trash like you and your mother will never be worthy of touching this. It was their own hunger for the pale skin of the highborn that made them slather on an unknown poison. That greed is what killed them. When they began falling ill one by one, I investigated quietly. That was how I learned the illness had been spreading in the Empire's north for years. The only difference from my last life is that the method now in use is one I deliberately leaked. Walter sighed. If we'd known the cure sooner, the late king might still be alive. A great pity. Arsinoe agreed lightly. Yes, a pity he died so early. It wrecked my entire plan. There's something so heavy I've been avoiding it. But I'm forced to bring your majesty bad news. After word spread of your accession, the third prince... I know. He killed the fifth prince and threw himself from a tower. You seem to want me to look grieved. But I'm sorry. He and I were never on good terms. I don't have half a drop of pity. Had he recovered, he'd have used his blood to fight me for the throne. Pitying a man like that would be absurd. Walter showed no shock or distaste, only confusion. My thinking was careless. Forgive me, it's fine. The palace side is cleaned up. Now we deal with the lords. Walter watched her back. The nail marks pressed deep into her palms were perfectly visible to him. In front of Walter, she no longer even bothered pretending. That was her first mistake, because what he was seeing would change them both in ways neither could predict. Whatever happened, this was her last life. She buried the ugly feelings, turned around and smiled at him. You called me Majesty again just now? Looks like you need a small punishment. Walter, come here in front of me. The man obediently stepped forward. Hold out your hand. He looked awkward, but held it out anyway. Unlike the back of it, his palm was covered in sword calluses. Arsinoe laid her hand on it, then pulled away fast. 2 stones were left behind. The very things Jan had told her to give Walter. He'd said she would get an interesting reaction. She hadn't really believed it. But a second later, Walter's eyes went wide. He drew a sharp breath. These are for me. Undisguised delight surfaced on that endlessly composed face. It was Arsinoe's turn to stall, stammering. If you stop calling me Majesty, both stones are yours. She held up 2 fingers and waggled them. Both of them, for you. Walter pressed his lips together, thinking it over seriously. Just as she was about to pull her hand back, he closed his fingers over it. Fine, I accept. Walter Heiberg, Grand General of Parnas at 28, collected rocks. Nobody would believe it. A soft smile reached his eyes. Gold-flecked stone with patterning like this I've never seen. I'll keep them carefully. She burst out laughing. All I meant to do was get you to change how you address me. I should have just made it an order. Walter lowered his head, closing his fingers around the 2 stones. Then a bright smile broke across his face. Thank you. I'll treasure them. Arsinoe. It was the first time he used her name. She stared at that smile, thinking to herself, truly, anything can happen. Pulling herself together, she said, then brace yourself. You're about to get very busy. I'm well used to the work at headquarters. There's no need to worry. That isn't the work I meant. Walter caught her meaning quickly. Just 1 week later, Duke Gilles abruptly declared secession and founded a kingdom of his own. Walter kept his usual expression as he read the document. Jan stood beside him, baffled. How can you be this calm? If I look calm to you, that's a good thing. The words had barely landed. When Arsinoe walked in, It's been a while, instructor. Jan now knew who she was and went rigid with panic. Walter shot him a look. Jan, mind your manners before Her Majesty. She set her book down. I heard someone mention an independent kingdom. What is that about? Jan clenched his fists, furious. Duke Gilles has joined with 3 other lords and declared independence. In the Council of Elders, they keep obstructing everything. Independence. Impossible. Men loyal to the kingdom. Don't change their position that easily. Treason, on the other hand, is entirely possible. I agree. Duke Gilles loves the kingdom, not just his own land. She already knew exactly what forces he commanded. She turned to Walter. When can we move into the palace? About a month. Then hold the coronation the same day we enter. No pageantry. Just announce it to the realm. It was late. Walter and Jan left together. Hard to imagine a queen that young talking Duke Gilles into silence. Not only that, those hardened schemers all bow their heads in front of her. She thought for a moment today and had a full strategy. Even at the academy, she was famous as a prodigy. Walter lowered his gaze. The woman in front of the lords was nothing like the one in private. That bearing wasn't inborn. And it wasn't an act. Calling her mature for her age wasn't quite right either. Nor was calling her precocious. Every time he spoke with her, he came away feeling like the child in the room. The more he learned about her, the harder she was to believe. In the west of the kingdom, Duke Gilles stood beneath the ripening grapes in his garden, remarking that this year's wine would be excellent. Good wine takes time. The final flavor cannot be forced. If that is true of wine, how much more of men? He would hand this land to no one. Father, you're out here. A dispatch has just arrived from the palace. Reading it, Duke Gilles curled his lip in a cold smile. So she plans to be crowned the same day she enters the palace. Even earlier than my declaration. I had intended to deal with Arsinoe at the founding ceremony, then march. If the palace wants it this way, then let's see who is laughing at the end. Crossing the corridor, the two of them reached the great hall at midnight. Moonlight came through the glass dome and settled silently on the throne. She stood there without moving. Walter ordered the attendants to light the candelabra. Arsinoe stared at the throne. The year she fled with her mother. Her father had ordered her killed on sight, sparing only her mother, and yet she had survived. The one who lost his life was her father. Now she was about to sit on that very chair. It was deep into the night before they returned to headquarters. Someone was standing in the room. Enormous snow-white wings made him impossible to miss. Arafi, Walter introduced him. This is Hugh Bosman, captain of the 8th Unit. From now on, he will be responsible for your Majesty's protection. Hugh saluted, his face blank. Greetings. Arsinoe caught the distance in his manner at once, until she mentioned she had once lived in Vumnos. Hugh's expression changed instantly. You've been to my homeland. She smiled faintly. Don't tell me you're from Vumnos, too. The Rafi have no real concept of a nation. Most are scattered across the world. They are cold to outsiders as a rule. Only for their homeland do they keep any deep feeling. Arsinoe put out her hand first. Hugh turned awkwardly to Walter. Is that true? Of course. I lived in hiding in the Nemi Mountains of Vumnos. I made my living harvesting barley and wild mushrooms. Business was decent. Walter cut in quietly. Salute Her Majesty first. She had only heard there were Rafi in the army. Walter explained. They belong to intelligence. Their identities aren't public. Hugh bowed slightly and asked, Your Majesty has met Rafi before. I lived in the north for 2 years. I met plenty. I hear the Rafi hate the lichen. Hugh lifted his chin, contempt in his voice. That furry lot have nothing but muscle. He didn't yet know that in a few months that furry lot would be the reason he and his queen were still breathing. The moment she said she had lived in Vumnos, the Hugh who had been so arrogant a second ago put out his own hand to shake hers. The Rafi are poor at telling human faces apart. By the time Hugh saw hers clearly, he suddenly remembered the person his mother had described in a letter, a young human girl with tea-gold hair. He yanked his hand back, eyes wide with shock. Your Majesty, are you the lichen trafficker? My mother wrote that someone pretended to help lichen emigrate, but was quietly taking money to sell them. That is not what happened. Walter spoke up immediately. Her Majesty did it to help them. Hugh pressed on. So you only moved them out of the country. Later, Arsinoe did in fact accept payment, but this was no time to explain, so she made up a reason on the spot. Hugh apologized. I misjudged you. I am the eldest son of Chieftain Omru of Vumnos. I will serve your Majesty with everything I have. Arsinoe gave Walter a small look. She had hidden the truth only because she needed Hugh's support right now. Walter nodded back faintly. Hugh had brought evidence of Duke Gilles' treason. He could field roughly 2,000 soldiers. Arsinoe frowned. Too few. Nobody starts a rebellion with 2,000. There are hidden forces. Find them. We've deployed every Rafi unit. We've searched the mountains and underground. Duke Gilles' territory is mostly plains. There's nowhere suitable to hide an army. Then you're missing something. What is his greatest weapon? Where does contraband change hands? Walter went quiet for a moment. Then it hit him. Postmeyer Harbor. He has hidden his entire force aboard ships. Arsinoe sat alone on a bench. A map of the harbor district lay in front of her. So this is where you are. A coat settled gently over her shoulders. It was Walter. Her mouth curved without her meaning it to. Only you ever find me. It was like this in Vumnos. It still is. Very few people know this place. She patted the seat beside her. Sit down. This path leads to Lady Angela's villa. Arsinoe lowered her eyes. Formal robes stain easily, so almost nobody comes here. Now this place is a memory too. The shadows under her eyes were darker than usual. Walter felt a pang. Let me handle the Duke. Your Majesty should sleep properly. If I hand every task large and small to my general, what face is left for a sovereign? Walter was working out how to talk her into resting, when she suddenly leaned in close. Her eyes were entirely serious, and his heart skipped a beat. The girl smiled with total confidence. There's something I want to ask of you. The day before the coronation, Arsinoe finally felt the weight of what she was about to become. Walter adjusted her robes as he asked, "Are you nervous? If you still have doubts, there's time to call it off. The plan you proposed is too dangerous." She stuck out her tongue. "Worst case, I die. As long as you follow the plan exactly, nothing will go wrong." Hugh announced himself outside. A Raffi she had never seen walked in. "Greetings, Your Majesty. I am Napari Hoja, 8th Unit." Jan came in right after and reported loudly, "Everyone is ready. We can move at any time." Hugh's brow furrowed at once. Jan looked openly annoyed. "Why is he here? Still as crude and ill-mannered as ever." Jan flared instantly. "You damn ball of feathers. Who are you calling an ill-mannered dog? The Raffi and the Lycan really did loathe each other exactly as rumored." Until Walter stopped them. "What you do behind my back is your business, but in front of Her Majesty, no insults." "Is the army in position?" "It is. But do you really want ordinary soldiers knowing the royal tunnels?" Arsinoe smiled faintly. "It's fine. Do as Walter says." The Raffi brought out a heavy chain and fastened one end to himself. The other end was locked to Walter. Before leaving, he gave Hugh a solemn instruction. At the first sign of danger, get Her Majesty out. The task Arsinoe had given Walter was to strike straight at Duke Gilles' weak point. She would stay in the palace and meet the attack. Gilles would certainly aim for the coronation, but Walter cared about one thing only. "Does this plan guarantee your safety? Tell me the truth. If I am not beside you, will Arsinoe come through this unharmed?" On the balcony, Walter looked at her one last time. "I trust Your Majesty's judgment. Until I return, please keep yourself whole." With that, he turned and gripped the chain tight. The Raffi lifted off. Chained to him, Walter left the ground with him. Arsinoe watched them go and answered silently, "I can't guarantee it, but I'll do my best to survive." Two figures faded into the sunset. More than losing the battle, what he feared first was losing her life. The war had begun. Walter was the first to set foot on Duke Gilles' land. He unhooked the chain and dropped out of the sky. The moment he touched down, he ran into a patrol. Before they could react, he dropped the first man in a blink. The other backed away in terror, opened his mouth to shout, and was finished on the spot. He broke straight for the target. Her words flashed through his mind. "Worst case, I die." His eyes went cold. He had to end this as fast as humanly possible. After Walter left, Arsinoe stayed behind to meet the attack alone. In the vast palace, there was only her and Hugh. A lazy yawn shattered the silence and made the tightly wound Hugh jump. "Majesty, we went to a lot of trouble to hide. There's only the two of us here. No need to be so tense." Watching how relaxed she was, Hugh sighed in defeat. "This is the first time I've heard a strategy this insane. It's 3 a.m. Will the Duke really come? We'll find out soon enough." Her gaze drifted downward, stopping on the blue pendant at Hugh's chest. The heat in her stare could have burned a hole through it. "Majesty, if you're curious, go ahead and touch it." "Sorry, it's the first time I've seen Frostfall stone in person. They say touching it freezes you." Hugh lifted the pendant out for her. "It doesn't. It just keeps my body temperature where it should be. And without it, I'd overheat and pass out. For the Raffi, the central climate is unbearable. Without that stone, the Raffi can only survive in the north." She filed the detail away. Later, it would decide who was still standing on the final battlefield. Frostfall stone is brutally hard to mine. It's worth as much as diamond. The 8th Raffi unit has only 12 men. Few would stake their lives on a stone that small. "Then why are you here? The Raffi love their freedom. As a chieftain's son, you could live in luxury in Vumnos. Nobody has ever asked me that." Hugh was quiet a while, then spoke slowly. "A chieftain's son is nothing special. My people care nothing for rank. As for why I stayed, it's really not much of a story." Arsinoe looked at him with open curiosity and kept pressing. Just then Jan came running. A large enemy force has poured into the western harbor. 4,000 are heading for headquarters. Another 4,000 straight for the palace. 8,000 in total. She gave the order at once. Have the roads into the palace been cleared? All civilians evacuated. Good. Follow the plan exactly. Draw every last one of them inside the palace. Duke Gilles may have plenty of schemes, but he is nowhere near qualified to face me. We will win. So fight with everything you have. There was no tension in Jan's eyes, only excitement. Yes, Majesty. He walked out of the palace and roared, "Everyone up, it's finally our turn." The Lycan warriors hidden in the ground rose as one. Under the moonlight, every pair of eyes flashed with cold light. Fight with everything. Whoever brings down the most enemies will be rewarded. On the other side, Duke Gilles stepped off the deck. A wave of dizziness caught him. He waved off the servant moving to steady him. I'm fine. By my count, the vanguard should already be hitting headquarters. He ordered the rest of his army toward the palace. The palace has to be taken before sunrise. He would not give that woman a single opening to counter. Earlier, he had deliberately let it appear he had only 2,000 men. Even with Arsenault on her guard, nobody could have guessed he had 8,000 elite troops in reserve. Capture her alive. And the Grand General stopped being a threat. The advance went smoothly, the Lycan blocking their path. Pulled back to the palace once the illusion grass was burned. Jan directed his men to lure the entire enemy force inside. Before the illusion grass wore off, he returned to Arsenault's side. Majesty, they're here. Well done, Jan, withdraw now. The Lycan warriors filed out through another tunnel. As the last man stepped into it, Jan turned back to Hugh. Listen, kid, if you can't protect Her Majesty, I'll fry you whole and eat you. See what Raffi tastes like. Hugh didn't bother answering. He grabbed Jan by the collar and threw him into the tunnel. Who do you think you're ordering around? Brat still smelling of the academy. Arsenault laughed out loud. You two really are close. Hugh froze solid. How did you get close out of that? Not at all. Hugh yanked the chain taut. Majesty, our turn. Soldiers' shouts rang across the sky. Found her. We found the fake princess. Take her. The commander has given the order. Whoever kills her first gets the reward. But the instant they stepped into the great hall, every one of them froze. Wings of pure white glowed like something holy under the moon. Hugh spread them wide. He shot up into the sky. Chained to him, Arsenault rose weightlessly. She laughed aloud. Do I look like a fake to you? The soldiers came to and started screaming. Archers! Get the archers up here! The hall dissolved into chaos. Her clear voice cut through all of it. Surrender now and I'll spare you. Stay right there and think it over. Hugh was quietly astonished. Even now she was completely at ease. Hugh, time to end this. The two of them landed on the top of the wall. The waiting soldiers saluted at once. Your Majesty. The palace is fully evacuated. Every position on the wall is manned. Arsenault turned to Hugh and spoke quietly. Go. He unhooked the chain and flew for the northern palace. She signaled the commander. Seal the palace. Not one of them gets out. The moment the order left her mouth, archers appeared along the wall. All positions. Ready? Arsenault set her arrow alight, aimed straight at the cable holding the gate. At the same moment, Hugh led the Raffi warriors over the courtyard. Each of them carried oil-soaked cloth sacks. They dropped them all at once. The arrow tore through the air and burned the cable clean through. The great gate ground shut with a heavy boom. 4,000 elite soldiers had just walked into a trap that had closed behind them. The hunt had begun. No shouting. No roaring. Only the sound of arrows splitting air, over and over above a silent wall. The enemy pouring into the courtyard went down in rows. The oil sacks the Raffi had dropped caught fire. In a heartbeat, the blaze swallowed the palace whole, sealing every enemy inside. Majesty, are you all right? Hugh folded his wings and landed. I'm fine. It's over here. I made all of you do something terrible. When this is done, open the hot springs in the palace. At that, the Raffi warriors broke into grins. Arsenault looked down at the hell below her and gave a cold order. Pull every soldier off the wall. Inside the palace, 4,000 elite troops were trapped. They could neither advance nor retreat. The fire was too vast. Even getting close was nearly impossible. Her mouth curved into a cold smile. Time to finish it. Duke Gilles had risen not for himself, but for his youngest son, Adlander. His eldest, by custom, had been heir to the title from birth. But his youngest, born with only one eye, had been looked down on his whole life. Adlinder was gifted, but the disability left him fragile and full of self-doubt. Years of that torment had driven the always composed Gilles to gamble everything, purely so no one would dare look down on his son again. He wanted to put Adlinder on the throne. That youngest son was the single greatest weakness of his life. When he learned that the 4,000 sent against headquarters had been wiped out, Gilles realized the palace had been held by one Lycan unit. Right then came word that the main force from headquarters was marching on the palace. His men were falling back on every front. Then the sounds of battle stopped altogether. What brought Gilles to his knees that night was not a blade, but something he had handed his enemy himself. An envoy of the kingdom of Parnes appeared. A letter from Her Majesty to Duke Gilles. Your overreach ends here. Out of respect for your years of service, I have no wish to take your life. Surrender now, and I will let the past go. If not, I will punish you under military law. I hope you choose the option you won't regret. At the bottom, she had drawn a mocking smiley face with one small line beside it. I have already left the palace. Don't waste your time looking. Gilles' rage went completely out of control. He tore the letter apart, eyes bloodshot. Even if I die here, I will never surrender. Kill that envoy. Every soldier drew at once. In that razor-thin instant, a familiar low voice rolled across the sky above them. Duke, if you don't want to regret this, stop. Gilles' head snapped up. The owner of that voice was the Grand General of the Dawn, Walter Heiberg. And the person in Walter's grip was the youngest son he loved most. A blade sat against the boy's throat. A thin line of blood began to run. Absolute despair swallowed Gilles. Please stop. Walter spoke coldly. I hear you refused Her Majesty's terms. Surrender and save your son, or sacrifice your own child to keep fighting. The outcome is already decided, which is the right choice. You understand that better than I do? Duke Gilles, as he once was, proud and unbending, finally let go of every last piece of that pride and surrendered. After the late king died, the princess who had hidden in the shadows revealed what she was and took hold of Walter's attention completely. A sovereign brimming with life. Someone the rot of the royal house had never touched. It was as if heaven had handed him the most perfect gift imaginable. So he chose loyalty. And that person could only be her. But there was one thing Arsenault had wrong. Walter had never revered royal authority. He despised how rotten the crown had become. Yet the royal house had been rooted for centuries. Reform and revolution were words that lived in dictionaries. All Walter had left was an ideal. For his family's sacrifices, he served his duty faithfully, while tearing himself apart over his inability to change anything. Until Arsenault appeared, she launched reforms. She cleaned out the court with a hard hand. She opened the first war herself. After they withdrew through the palace tunnels, Arsenault was so exhausted she collapsed on the ground. Hugh frowned. Your Majesty's endurance is remarkable. She didn't care. Having somewhere to hide is already a luxury. You're a soldier. Never been anywhere like this. Being a soldier doesn't mean doing filthy work. This place is crawling with insects. Really, look at this. It's a cricket. Hugh shrieked and curled up against the wall. His flailing panic gave Arsenault the urge to torment him. Only when he was about to lose his temper did she pull her hand back. So you really are scared of bugs. They don't bother me. If anything, they bring back memories. What memories could your Majesty have with a cricket? It's not an old flame. She changed the subject. Ever eaten one? Hugh's feathers went up. Please stop teasing me. I have wings. I'm not an actual bird. I'm not joking. At least this one is still edible. What Alejandro had done to her meant that even after being reborn, there was a long stretch where she could barely swallow anything. Majesty, an officer came running, out of breath, with the news that Duke Gilles had surrendered. Hugh looked at her, delighted. Majesty, we won. Arsenault didn't celebrate. She only let out a long breath. Yes, it's over. She lay back down. Let me sleep. Wake me in 2 hours. Hugh quietly covered her with a blanket. In the imperial palace, someone couldn't help remarking that the star of tonight's banquet, by anyone's reckoning, was Her Highness Arsenault. How can anyone in this world be that beautiful? But the woman in the mirror felt no joy at all. This gorgeous shell existed only to please the man strangling her fate. And that husband in name only had gone mad for war. Once the emperor fell bedridden, the crown prince couldn't wait to seize the regency. He began preparing to devour the continent. He held no military authority, and yet somehow, he moved armies from elsewhere. In the blink of an eye, he had taken Dopin and Ingasila. Now he wanted her homeland too. Parnes, happy birthday. Arsino. He looked at her tenderly. She flinched and shrank back on instinct. I thought you wouldn't come today. It's the birthday of the woman I love. How could I miss it? Or am I so late that I've upset you? Not long before, he had tortured her for days, coaxing and forcing by turns. He even promised that if she agreed, he would make her the Empire's only empress. She still refused. She buried what she felt and shook her head with a smile. Not at all. Alejandro produced an exquisite jewelry box. She asked curiously, "What is it?" "Open it, you'll like it." She lifted the lid, and the instant she saw what was inside, the blood in her body turned to ice. 2 pale, slender fingers lay in the box. Alejandro's voice stayed gentle. To her, it was the hiss of a blade. "I begged you to tell me about the royal tunnels. You ignored me. I thought you needed something to help you understand your position." She recognized those fingers instantly. The small ring on one of them was the gift she had given her mother. He lifted her chin gently. "Just say the word and all of it goes away. Your mother really does look like you, both rare beauties." Hatred swallowed her whole. I have to kill him. I have to kill him. Kill this lunatic who treats human lives like weeds, who butchers anyone who crosses him. She had come back and taken a throne, wanting neither peace nor luxury. The only thing she wanted was to sever his head with her own hands and to make him watch the blade before it fell. This time I will not fail. I will spend everything I have to make him taste the worst agony there is. I'll call it a gift for you. You insane bastard, she wanted to scream, but her throat produced only broken sounds of pain. Then suddenly a warm hand covered her eyes. On reflex, she grabbed hold of it. As her vision cleared, she finally saw the person leaning over her. It was not the crown prince. Majesty, she was lying with her head in Walter's lap. She let out a breath. Looking around, this was the Heiberg family estate. The palace and headquarters are both unfit for rest right now. I took the liberty of bringing you here. Please forgive me. Duke Gilles is imprisoned. The palace is nearly in order, but the most dangerous man in this court is still sitting untouched in his chair. Arsino sat up beside him. Half a day and you've handled all of it. You've worked hard. Walter's hair was slightly disordered. The usual neatness was gone. Exhaustion he couldn't hide showed in his eyes. She felt a pang of guilt. Sorry. Leave the rest to me. Go rest, Walter said quietly. I'm used to going without sleep. It's nothing. He paused a beat. If anything, your majesty is the one who needs rest. You've been running a fever this whole time. She touched her own forehead. Really, I don't feel anything. Walter was certain. Since last night, you've been holding on to me and refusing to let go. She had no idea what he was talking about. Hold on. You said what? You were dressed far too lightly last night. You must have caught a chill. I was worried something was wrong. Before she could ask anything else, Walter raised his hand again and laid it gently on her forehead. Those endlessly calm eyes rippled. His fingertips slid down, pinched her cheek lightly, then went around behind her back. Forgive me. Without waiting for her to react, he pulled her straight into his arms. You still have a fever. You need to stay warm. With that, he lifted her up and carried her steadily toward the bed. There is a great deal I want to say to your majesty, and a great deal I want to ask. But simply seeing you safe with my own eyes leaves nothing in me but relief. He was saying the most ordinary things, and yet in her ears they sounded exactly like a confession. So everything she had let slip in her nightmare had gone straight into Walter's ears. After carrying her into the bedroom, Walter didn't leave. Instead, he brought up the battle. Your Majesty's strategy was extraordinary. Though the 2,000 who held the palace, where did you gather them? She answered honestly. They weren't regulars, mostly farmers. I borrowed men from Marquis Luther and a few other lords. Real combat would have exposed them instantly. But Duke Gilles is a cautious man. He would never risk attacking a force twice his size. Your Majesty is formidable. As a subject and as a soldier, I have nothing but admiration. But I beg you, never make a plan that dangerous again. The whole way back, I did nothing but fear for your safety. She didn't answer. She couldn't lie to Walter. Walter reached out and brushed a strand of hair off her forehead. Last night, you were in a cold sweat and talking in your sleep constantly. What exactly did that dog do to you? To cause you that much pain? There is such a man. Just remembering him makes me want to kill him. I wish I'd woken up a little later. Why? Because that bastard gave me a gift. I want to use that same gift to smash his skull open. I don't know who he is, but perhaps your Majesty's mortal enemy appeared in that dream. She smiled as if recounting something ordinary. That's right. One day I'll take that man's head. But her hands were shaking. Walter lowered his eyes. Your Majesty needn't do it personally. Your enemy is my enemy. Let me take his head for you. Tell me who he is. Her eyes went wide. She had expected Walter to tell her not to talk like that, or to change the subject. Instead, he said the exact thing she most wanted to hear. Kill Alejandro. It was the sentence she had swallowed for 4 lifetimes, and for the first time someone was willing to hear it. Seeing her clutch her chest, breathing unevenly, Walter moved closer at once. Arsinoe, are you unwell? But her cheeks had gone red. Where did you learn to talk like that? Stop saying things like, I'd kill for you. Keep this up and I'm going to want to marry you. Walter was already far too good-looking, and now he was saying that to her face. She waved him off frantically. Get out, or I won't be able to control myself. But Walter stayed rooted where he was. Standing there means you want me to kiss you. It took several rounds of shooing before Walter left the room in a daze. She lay down and sighed. But the person who kills Alejandro can only be her. Arsinoe let out a small laugh. This was her last life either way. Duke Gilles had fallen, but when the tiger leaves, the wolves come. It was time to set the second trap. People imagine war as swords and slaughter. Only those who have truly been through it understand that war is a contest of strategy. Afterward, the paperwork piled up like a mountain, until it nearly buried the command office, leaving Hugh uneasy. You keep bringing in more files. Would you like some tea? Walter didn't even look up. No, if it spills on the documents, it becomes a problem. Most of this work used to be handled by Duke Gilles. Now that he's stripped of office, Walter had to shoulder it. Hugh asked curiously. What sentence did Duke Gilles get in the end? Only then did Walter raise his head. Exile to the temple north of the palace. Menial cleaning work for life. Hugh's jaw dropped. Menial work. Better to kill him. That is pure humiliation. For a great noble, honor matters more than life. Walter set down his work. I think for a traitor, the sentence is still too light. It seems you and I see this differently. Hugh stiffened. Walter went on coldly. At first I wondered why Her Majesty decided this way, but watching your reaction, I think I understand. The dead are easily painted into tragic heroes by later generations. Some even become spiritual figureheads. But reduce him to a broken man and he becomes a cautionary joke. The deterrent on the other nobles is greater than an execution. Which reminds me, the council is about to start. The chill around him vanished at once. His voice softened. Her Majesty is making a very important decision at the council today. I need to go escort her. Half a month had passed since Duke Gilles' failed rebellion. Every noble in the chamber carried private thoughts. Those who had quietly backed Gilles looked grim, while the nobles Arsinoe had cured sang the new sovereign's praises. Marquis Luther clearly belonged to the second group. His daughter's improvement had lit him up. Duke Walton offered congratulations, then immediately changed tone. The people of a territory are not merchandise. How can they be shuffled around at will? For the stability of the country, offering help is simply what one does. And Her Majesty saved my daughter's life. So that's why you gambled with your own people. Her Majesty assured me no one in my territory would be harmed. I simply choose to trust her. A few empty promises and you drop your guard entirely. That sentence would be relayed word for word to the Queen, and it would cost one man in that chamber everything. Marquis Luther's face darkened. You know perfectly well Duke Gilles and I were never on good terms. To get the cure, my only option was Her Majesty's side. Duke Walton had no answer. It was a long moment before he managed one. At worst, things stay as they were. How? If he had succeeded back then, what waited for me and every soul in my territory was a traitor's ending. It seems my cooperation with Her Majesty displeases you a great deal. I will be relaying your words to her exactly as spoken. Arsinoe entered the hall in a white military uniform. Every lord present looked startled. But what shook them more was her plan for Duke Gilles' confiscated territory. She would hand it to the lords to administer on her behalf, rather than absorb it into the crown. Since she had only just taken the throne, lords who knew the region would manage it better. Count Hahn spoke first. Your Majesty means this is not a granting of land, but territory held directly by the kingdom. Correct, I would guess. Your Majesty intends to give it to Duke Walton and Marquis Luther. In my view, a region that large should not be governed by one man. 2 administrators would be safer. The area is simply too big. One person cannot cover it. If 2 lords share it, the population will accept it more easily. That had been Arsinoe's intention all along. She hadn't expected Count Han to arrive at the same thought. Very good, we'll do as you suggest. The 2 of you will govern jointly. Of the profits from the region, the kingdom takes half, and the administrators take half. Neither man could hide his excitement. The revenue from Postmeyer Harbor alone equaled an ordinary lord's income for an entire year. When the map was opened, Marquis Luther jumped in first. I'll take this section. My lands border the sea. I have real experience running ports. Duke Walton was on his feet immediately. Absurd. You think Postmeyer is some little country dock. The place also serves a diplomatic function. It demands knowledge of foreign customs and protocol. I am the appropriate choice. The 2 argued fiercely in open council, back and forth without stopping, until Arsinoe cut in. Enough. Both of you have gone too far. Postmeyer is indeed an irreplaceable strategic zone. It cannot be carved up carelessly. I hadn't thought it through. The words had barely left her when she abruptly stood. I will give this further consideration. Today's session ends here. Arsinoe walked straight out of the chamber, leaving the lords staring blankly at one another. On the way out, she couldn't hold back a laugh. Their reactions really were entertaining. Maybe I've lived too long. That's why I enjoy small amusements like this. The remark left Walter completely lost. Your Majesty, forgive me, there is something I'd like to ask. Duke Gillis's territory is enormously valuable. Why hand it to the lords? Is it that hard to follow? Honestly, letting them run it costs the crown part of the revenue. But now that Gillis has fallen, do you truly think the other nobles will submit to me sincerely? Walter nodded without hesitating. Of course they will. I knew you'd say that. Unfortunately, no. They see me as a young, untested king, and they'll wait for their moment to work the board. Your Majesty is the one who brought Duke Gilles down, but how many people know that? Every lord believes the man who toppled him was Grand General Walter, and I'm still just a princess with no power and no standing. It had never occurred to Walter that his own reputation could be an obstacle to her, that it might be stealing credit that belonged to her. Arsinoe patted his back and soothed him. There's no need to blame yourself. This is the situation I built on purpose. What happens if I play the innocent and stay out of governance? They'll drop their guard. They might even show their real intentions. Exactly. She made a show of praising him. You're sharp. A piece of bait. And once they start fighting over it quietly, they show their true faces. Your Majesty means to bait the lords with the Duke's land, more or less. Besides Duke Gilles, is there anyone else you'd want removed? Arsinoe pressed her lips shut. Her silence was the answer. Across countless loops of her life, she had watched the trajectory of a great many people. Some showed a different face every single time. Others never changed from beginning to end. In the last moments of her life, Duke Gilles had stood shoulder to shoulder with Walter, holding the line for Parnes to the very end. But what about the other lords? Some stayed neutral. Some spied for the empire. If even the great nobles were doing that, then the fall of Parnes was inevitable. That noble who had turned informant, she needed to confirm whether he would betray them again this time. Beyond that, there was one more thing to confirm: the identity of the person who stood with Walter to the last. The group entered the temple. Hugh looked around with open curiosity. Do all the monks here shave their heads? Walter motioned for him to lower his voice. Shaving is a form of practice for them. They believe hair symbolizes the past. Attachment breeds suffering. As a Raffi, Hugh couldn't understand the idea at all. But he suddenly stopped walking. White feathers kept drifting down onto the path, and something about it unsettled him. He crouched quickly, gathered them, and tucked them away. Then, as if nothing had happened, he switched to Walter's sword. Dawn was once the divine relic worshipped in this place. Arsinoe looked to Walter for confirmation. Really, it's true. The young priest beside them answered eagerly. For all these years, not one person could wield it. So it stayed sealed underground, until he drew it out. There was a prophecy. Whoever can lift the dawn will recover the true name of the nameless god. So Nameless isn't the god's real name. The young priest looked at her like she was slow. Who would name anyone that? When the true name is recovered, the god will descend. Then the Grand General is the one the god chose. The young priest nodded over and over. Walter reminded him, resigned. Cindy, hurry up, or we'll fall behind. The young priest and Hugh brought up the rear, unable to contain their excitement. Even the Grand General's voice is lovely. Hugh agreed completely. Arsinoe added that he was also extremely handsome, a truly perfect man. She had no idea that a few more steps would put her in front of the one person who could overturn her entire game. Walter finally couldn't take it. This is a sacred place. Please keep your voices down. But she noticed the tips of his ears had quietly gone red. Her eyes narrowed. So in the future, if she wanted to rattle Walter, a few compliments worked better than any order. A while later, the group reached the temple's rear courtyard. The rasp of a broom sweeping leaves reached them. Something shifted in Arsinoe's eyes. She told the others to wait, and walked forward alone. It's been a long time. Duke Gilles went still. Nothing of his old spirit was left. There's a matter I came here to ask you about today. What could a fallen man have that's worth a sovereign's personal visit? I'm struggling with what to do with your territory. I intend to hand it jointly to Marcus Luther and Duke Walton. What do you think? I'm not interested. Decide as you like. Everyone knows you poured your whole heart into governing that land. You always thought of the people. So why say you aren't interested now? Gilles' mouth twitched. Have you come to mock me? That was not my intention. He looked up at the sky, his face bitter. I'm no longer bound to anyone now. Let go of every attachment. These days I am trying to put it all down as well. It was hard at first, but over time it becomes peaceful. Strip away Lord and Duke, and what remains is just me. My raising an army against you was nothing but my own greed. I grasped at too much, so I set my sights on the throne. Has your majesty ever regretted anything? I'm sorry, I never have. The late king named no successor, and left no legitimate heir. I held the power to move this entire kingdom. With that standing, contesting the throne was inevitable. Given the chance to do it again, I would choose the same. But I owe you an apology. I underestimated you. I thought you were nothing but a puppet the Grand General had propped up. I understand. In your place, I would have thought the same. True. But looking back, the Grand General never needed to do any of that. If he wanted the crown, a direct coup would have been enough. That he was willing to raise you up instead must have had a real reason behind it. My own short-sightedness. You truly are a rare kind of queen? May I take that praise as sincere? Gilles laughed out loud. I have nothing left. Why would I flatter you now? Arsinoe lowered her voice. Duke Gilles, as I see it, the only difference between us has ever been ideals. You opposed me not out of hunger for the crown, but because you genuinely wanted to protect Parnes. So if I am to be king, come back and help me. He stood, laughing bitterly. You really are direct? But you should find someone else. I have tasted every luxury this life has to offer. Living as an ordinary man now isn't bad. Arsinoe smiled faintly, and she still had to play the card she didn't want to. Don't you want to know how your son is? He's still held in the headquarters prison. He says it's to atone for his father. He's been refusing food for days. I hear he was never strong to begin with. I don't know how much longer he can hold on. Gilles' face changed instantly. You dare use my son to threaten me. If you had beaten me honestly, I could have served you with my whole heart. But you had the victory locked down from the start, and you still used my son. That is why I cannot forgive you. I don't need your forgiveness. The voice that answered him held no warmth at all. Duke Gilles, you have always measured the world by your own standard. Do you know why I took your son hostage? Because you arrogantly seized what belonged to me. You treasure Adlander, just as I treasure my soldiers. The men you meant to destroy were also somebody's sons and somebody's fathers. So I chose the most effective method available. Then who has the standing to condemn me? And you claim you've let everything go. You are nowhere close. Don't mistake my civility for us being the same kind of person. I am the winner who defeated you. If there is still something you want to protect, then hold yourself accordingly. Before long, the palace was fully in order, ready for its new mistress. And yet Arsinoe, citing security, flatly refused to leave headquarters. More precisely, she refused to leave the commander's office. So so headquarters was permanently packed with attendants, maids, and soldiers of every rank. Every time a few groups crossed paths, something absurd happened. You could tell from the noise alone that trouble had started again. Walter sat in the office, expression unchanged, already working out how to fix it, until a faint sound from the inner room broke his train of thought. He realized that no amount of agonizing would help, so he decided to say it directly. He shoved the door open and looked silently at the sovereign rolling back and forth on the sofa. Arsinoe noticed and bolted upright. She was wearing only a thin slip, with a pen and documents still in her hands. Walter shut the door. "Your Majesty, I believe it is time you returned to the palace. But I feel nothing for that place. I'm perfectly fine here." Walter didn't yield. "Once you're back, you'll grow used to it soon enough. The palace left me nothing but bad memories. Besides, the finest swordsman on the continent is here. I feel safer. I know you dislike it, but the palace is where a sovereign's authority is made visible. Please stop putting it off." Arsinoe made no effort to hide her reluctance. "I'll go back after the coronation." "You say that every time, citing the Lord's oaths as an excuse to keep delaying. Or is this about Duke Gilles? Ever since you visited him, your mood hasn't been right." As far as Walter knew, she appeared carefree but worked with meticulous care and left no gaps. "Did I look that bad that day? I have a feeling you're holding something in. Other than me, I doubt anyone would notice." "You're right. Duke Gilles is impossibly stubborn. I lowered myself that far, and he still can't make up his mind." "Why does your Majesty insist on winning him over?" "Because there is nobody better. He has done a great deal for Parnes, and his character isn't bad, and only he can help me drag the traitor sitting in this court into the light." Arsinoe pushed the stack of books on the sofa aside and gestured for Walter to come closer. "Walter, do you know what you and Gilles have in common?" "I don't." "You both live for Parnes. You protect its borders with force. He protected the country with power. His thinking may be extreme, but he loves Parnes sincerely." Arsinoe hugged her knees. Her waist-length hair swayed, brushing across Walter's hand where it rested on the sofa. She kept talking, unbothered. "But the other lords aren't like that. They only want to keep their own lands. They don't care who this country belongs to." Walter understood immediately who she meant. They say Marquis Luther has extremely sharp political instincts. His reputation among the nobility is good. And Duke Walton is deeply trusted by the elders. 3 generations of loyal service. Arsinoe asked. "So between those two, who do you think fits better?" Faced with a question that blunt, Walter couldn't answer right away. He sank into thought. An amused smile spread across her face. After a while, Walter spoke. "Honestly, neither is a suitable choice. Though, your Majesty, please move back a little." Arsinoe grinned mischievously and nudged him aside. He shifted over obligingly. She used the space to lie down. "You're right. They're both capable, but their politics are delicate. Personally, I lean toward Marquis Luther, but he lacks the standing to hold the elders in check. Whoever I pick, the lords will be unhappy. Rather than persuade them one by one, persuading Duke Gilles is simpler." She noticed a small mole under Walter's chin, half hidden. She reached out a fingertip and touched it lightly. The man's face went completely blank. Mischief done, she turned away at once and changed the subject. "By the way, how is Adlander doing lately?" "Much better now. He's buried in books." Arsinoe sighed. "A family famous for generations of warriors, and it produced a son that gentle," Walter answered evenly. "Everyone has their own nature. It's perfectly normal." She looked at him in disbelief. "The second son of the Heiberg family, born into a warrior clan, and the finest of them all. And you say that." "I'm only stating a fact. Besides, I never expected to become a soldier." Arsinoe looked skeptical. "Really? I happened to grasp Sword Aura by chance, then happened to pick up the Sword Dawn. Expectations kept growing, so I ended up in the army." "Happened to pick up the Dawn." She was stunned by the phrasing. "I was simply lucky enough to complete a few important missions, and promotions followed." His tone was utterly sincere, and it was that sincerity that left people speechless. Geniuses always insist they're perfectly ordinary, then offer explanations that convince nobody. Arsinoe closed her eyes decisively. "Walter, be quiet for a while. I'm going to sleep." Walter said nothing more. Warm afternoon light filled the room. The quiet around them was almost strange. After a long silence, he spoke softly, testing, "Are you asleep, Majesty?" No answer came. Realizing she had truly fallen asleep, Walter carefully lifted a lock of her hair, that long tea-gold hair he had wanted to touch for so long. He looked at her sleeping face and thought about the things she said in her fever. An 18-year-old girl cannot know in advance the day a king will die, cannot know a cure that defeated an entire nation's scholars, and cannot hate a man that deeply without ever having met him. Walter leaned in close and asked it out loud, knowing she couldn't hear him. Arsinoe, who exactly are you?